Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much. Have you ever felt like something incredible was just around the corner, but suddenly, everything in your life began to unravel? Why does it feel like the moment you get closest to your breakthrough is also when the pressure is the greatest? What if what you're facing isn't a setback, but a sign that God is about to give you something big? Let me tell you today, what you're going through is not by accident. It's not random. It's not bad luck. It's alignment. It's preparation. When everything seems to be falling apart, it could be that heaven is setting things in motion for your biggest blessing yet. When God is about to give you something big, He doesn't just hand it to you. He prepares you for it. He refines your heart, strengthens your endurance, and tests your character. He stretches you, not to break you, but to make room for what He's about to pour into your life. The truth is, many people walk away too soon. They get discouraged in the fire, unaware that the fire is not punishment, it's preparation. They misinterpret delays as denials, not realizing that heaven's timing is never rushed, but always exact. When God is about to give you something big, He often allows discomfort to grow your faith and pruning to shape your future. And if you don't know the signs, you might give up right before the miracle arrives. But not this time. Today, I'm going to show you what to look for. What signs reveal that your breakthrough is near. I want to help you hold on just a little bit longer. Because what's coming isn't small, it's bigger than anything you've dared to imagine. So lean in, because now we're stepping into the very first signal that a divine shift is happening in your life. Just as we explore in part 1, the pressure you feel before breakthrough is often the clearest indication that you're closer than you think. But here's what many people miss. The opposition isn't the end. It's confirmation. Too often, people give up without realizing they were only one step away from stepping into the very thing they have been praying for. They walk away not because God wasn't moving, but because they didn't recognize that opposition is often a sign that God is about to do something big. Think about it. Why would the enemy waste energy on someone who poses no threat? Why would storms suddenly appear in the life of someone not carrying something valuable? If you felt the resistance growing stronger, if it seems like every door is slamming shut, if your peace feels shaken and the storm is louder than ever, this is not your cue to back down. This is your cue to press in. Let me remind you of Joseph. God gave him a dream, a vision of influence, leadership, and blessing. But what happened before the dream became a reality? Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned. From the outside, it looked like the dream had died. Imagine the moments of doubt that must have crept in. Imagine the temptation to say, maybe I misunderstood God. Maybe this is just how life ends for me. But Joseph didn't stop believing. He stayed faithful even when the evidence told him otherwise. And in one divine moment, yes, just one, God flipped the script. One day, he was in a prison cell. The next, he was standing before Pharaoh, stepping into the very destiny God had promised all along. Now pause and reflect. Have you ever felt like the pressure in your life is more than you can bear? Have you looked at your situation and thought, God, where are you in this? You're not alone, but you might be standing in the exact place where your breakthrough is about to begin. And in the next part, we're going to look at how your greatest resistance often comes just before your greatest release. Let's keep going, because your breakthrough is closer than you think. In the last part, we reflected on how pressure often precedes promotion. Now, let's take that truth a step further. What if the chaos you're facing isn't the enemy's victory, but God's final stage of preparation? So often, things seem to fall apart just when we've finally mustered the faith to believe for something greater. But what if we've misunderstood the moment? What if the storm is not a signal to turn back, but confirmation that you're walking straight toward your breakthrough? That the very struggle you're facing right now is not a roadblock, but the last hurdle before something shifts. I've seen this pattern repeat itself over and over. Before God moves powerfully, He allows a season of refining, a time that tests our faith, stretches our endurance, and forces us to let go of control. And no, it's not because He wants to hurt us. It's because He loves us too much to bless us prematurely. A blessing that comes too soon can become a burden. But a blessing that comes after you've been strengthened, that's a gift you can carry with confidence. Let's be honest. There are lessons we only learn in the fire. There are muscles of faith we only build in the storm. God doesn't just want to give you a breakthrough. He wants to make sure you're the person who can sustain it. That's why, right before something big happens, opposition will rise. Doors may shut. Confusion may cloud your vision. But that's not your cue to panic. It's your cue to stand firm, to hold on to the promise, to trust that even when nothing looks like it's changing, God is working behind the scenes. Think of David. He was anointed as king, yes, but did he step into that role the next day? No. He spent years running for his life from Saul, hiding in caves, facing betrayals and constant battles. But those years weren't wasted. They were the training ground. God was forming him into a king, not just one who would wear a crown, but one who would carry the weight of leadership with wisdom, humility, and strength. So what about you? What might God be preparing you for right now? In the next part, we'll uncover the specific signs that often show up when God is about to release something significant into your life, and how to recognize them before the door opens. Let's keep going. You're closer than you think. In the last section, we saw how God uses delay as development, not denial. Now, let's look deeper into the heart of what happens during those in-between seasons. You see, David didn't become a great king simply because he was anointed. He became great because of what God formed in him during the waiting. Every cave he hid in, every betrayal he endured, and every moment of uncertainty shaped the heart of a true leader. And when the appointed time came, nothing on earth could stop what God had already ordained. Maybe you're in that place right now. Maybe it feels like you're constantly on the run. Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. You're facing battles you never saw coming. You've been standing on a promise, but lately, it feels like the weight of life is louder than the whisper of God's voice. And somewhere deep inside, you've started wondering, is this really what He said? Did I hear Him right? But friend, this is not the end of your story. In fact, the resistance you're facing may be the clearest indication that breakthrough is just around the corner. The pressure? It's not there to crush you. It's proof that you're carrying something valuable. The struggle? It's not meant to make you give up. It's preparing you to receive what you've prayed for with both strength and humility. When God is about to give you something big, He ensures you're strong enough to carry it. And how does He do that? Through the wait. Waiting is one of the hardest seasons any believer will ever endure. It stretches your faith, challenges your mindset, and exposes your deepest fears. It's frustrating. It's silent. It feels like you're stuck between a promise and a reality you can't yet touch. And here's where it gets real. Even though you know God is faithful, even though you believe He's working, the lack of progress can still make you doubt. You wonder if maybe you misheard Him. Maybe the dream wasn't from Him. Maybe it was just you hoping too much. But let me remind you of something powerful. When God is preparing to give you something great, He almost always leads you into a season of waiting. Not to punish you, not to delay you out of cruelty, but to prepare you deeply. Because it's in the waiting that character is forged. It's in the waiting that pride is stripped away and trust is established. It's in the waiting that your roots go deep, anchoring you not in circumstances, but in Him. And this is exactly where many people stumble, because we live in a world that despises waiting. But in the kingdom of God, waiting is where the greatest preparation happens. In the next part, we'll uncover how to recognize what God is doing while you wait, and how to stay anchored until the breakthrough arrives. Keep watching. You're closer than you know. In the last section, we explored how the waiting season is more than just a pause. It's preparation. Now, let's go even deeper into understanding why God often delays what we're praying for. We live in a world that idolizes speed. Everything around us demands urgency. Instant messaging, instant deliveries, instant results. And so, when God slows things down, it can feel like he's ignoring us. But the truth is, God's timing is never random. It is intentional, calculated, and always aimed at our growth. If you're feeling like your waiting is a waste of time, I want to remind you, it's not. God is not just preparing your blessing. He is preparing you to carry it well. Look at the life of Abraham. God gave him a bold promise that he would be the father of many nations. But then silence. Years passed. He and Sarah grew older, and the promise began to feel like a distant memory. Every passing day seemed to contradict what God had spoken. Can you imagine the inner turmoil, the private tears, the quiet moments of wondering, did I really hear from God? But what Abraham didn't know is that behind the scenes, God was aligning generations, nations, and timelines. The delay wasn't denial, it was divine orchestration. And when the appointed time arrived, when every condition aligned with God's perfect will, the promise came to life. Not a second too soon, and not a second too late. Maybe that's where you are right now. You've been walking through a dry, silent, challenging season. You've been praying faithfully, trusting consistently, and yet the breakthrough hasn't arrived. And to make things harder, you see others stepping into their blessings, answered prayers, open doors, testimonies of transformation, and quietly you ask, God, did you forget about me? Let me assure you, God has not forgotten you. He hasn't lost sight of your prayers. He isn't ignoring your efforts. He's simply preparing something that's too important to rush. Some blessings require maturity. Some breakthroughs demand deeper faith. And the only place those are developed is in the furnace of waiting. There are things God is building in you right now. Wisdom, patience, trust, resilience that will sustain you long after the blessing arrives. If he handed it to you too soon, it could crush you. But in his mercy, he's letting your roots grow deep before the fruit appears. So don't resent the wait. Respect it. Lean into it. Allow it to refine you. Because when the fulfillment comes, you'll understand why it took time. In the next part, we'll explore the key signs that God is about to move and how to position yourself to receive all that he's prepared. Stay with me, because the season is shifting. Just as we saw earlier, waiting isn't a punishment, it's preparation. Now let's go deeper into why God sometimes holds the door shut a little longer. If he opened that door before the right time, you wouldn't be ready to walk through it. Instead of feeling like a blessing, it would feel like a burden. And because God loves you deeply, he will never give you something too soon that could end up harming you. Take David, for example. He was anointed to be king while he was still a young shepherd boy. But did he rush to the throne? No. He returned to the fields. He spent years tending sheep, years living in the shadows, years fleeing from Saul, wondering when, if ever, God's promise would become reality. But those silent, unseen years weren't wasted. They were sacred. God was molding him in the background, forging his character, deepening his wisdom, strengthening his resolve. So by the time David finally wore the crown, he wasn't just a king in title. He had become a king in heart, in soul, and in strength. He had been shaped for the weight of his calling. And maybe that's where you are now, a season of waiting. It can feel lonely, uncertain, and frustrating. But don't mistake God's silence for absence. He's not withholding the promise. He's preparing you for it. He's stretching your faith, expanding your endurance, and refining your spirit so that when the moment comes, you'll be fully ready to receive it. And oh, when God moves, he moves swiftly. One ordinary moment, everything seems unchanged. But then in the blink of an eye, doors fling wide open, prayers are answered, and you step boldly into what you've long awaited. So until then, remain faithful. Stay rooted. Keep trusting. Because whenever God makes you wait, it's never to deny you. It's to prepare you for something far greater than you imagined. And just before that breakthrough, He often gives signs. But recognizing them, well, that's where the next part begins. As we just explored, God rarely moves without first giving us glimpses, subtle signs that a shift is coming. But are we paying attention when those signs arrive? Have you ever experienced a moment when something deep inside you just knew change was coming? Even if you couldn't explain it? A quiet stirring in your spirit, an undeniable sense that something was shifting in the atmosphere. That wasn't just a passing thought. It wasn't coincidence. It was God preparing you, softly but intentionally, for what was ahead. Before every major move, He often sends small, divine clues. A door opens when you least expect it, or maybe, just as unexpectedly, one closes. And what feels like disappointment, it might actually be divine redirection. Take Moses, for instance. He had spent years in the wilderness, living what seemed like a quiet, uneventful life as a shepherd. Everything must have felt routine, even mundane. But one day, he noticed something out of the ordinary, a bush burning, but not burning up. It made him pause. It pulled his attention. And that moment of turning aside became the moment that changed everything. Because it was there, at that exact moment of stillness, that God spoke. Now, think about this. What if Moses had been too busy, too distracted, too caught up in his usual rhythm to notice the miracle in front of him? He could have missed it. And we too can miss what God is revealing if we're too fixated on our plans, too weighed down by frustration, or too rigid in our expectations of how things should unfold. We pray for answers, for direction, for purpose. But when God begins to shift things, when the signs start appearing, we often hesitate or resist simply because it doesn't match the picture we had in mind. Yet God's ways are not bound by our expectations. When He's about to take you into something greater, He will send signals. They might show up through people, unexpected circumstances, or even through a quiet but persistent sense in your heart that just won't go away. So what do we do when we sense those signs? That's where the next part begins. Previously, we talked about how God gives signs before a breakthrough. But the real challenge is recognizing them, especially when they don't come in the way we expect. Sometimes those signs show up as sudden endings. A relationship falls apart. A job ends without warning. A door you were sure would open stays firmly shut. And in the moment, it hurts. It's confusing. It makes no sense. But what if that closed door wasn't rejection? It was protection. What if God, in His wisdom, was removing something from your life to make space for something better? So often, we mourn what's gone, not realizing that what we lost was only clearing the path for what we've been praying for all along. Other times, the sign comes as a deep, undeniable stirring within you. Have you ever felt something so strongly in your spirit that you couldn't ignore it? A dream, a vision, or a persistent idea that just kept coming back, no matter how much you try to push it away. That's not just your mind wandering. That's God planting a seed inside you, something He intends to bring to life. But here's where it gets real. When God gives you a vision, He rarely gives you the full blueprint. He shows you just enough to take the next step. Look at Gideon. When God called him to lead, he was filled with doubt. He wasn't sure if he had heard right. So he asked for confirmation. And God, in His mercy, gave it. Not once, but twice. Because God understands our need for clarity. He knows we wrestle with uncertainty. And in His faithfulness, He provides the reassurance we seek. Still, be aware. Sometimes the confirmation you receive won't come neatly packaged in logic. It may not fit your expectations. It may even defy what makes sense to the world around you. Because when God moves, He often calls you to step out in faith, to trust Him beyond your understanding. And so, the real question becomes, When God gives you a sign, will you trust him enough to act on it? That's what we'll explore next. Earlier, we reflected on how God often calls us to act on faith, even when the details aren't clear. Now let's talk about what that actually looks like in real life. God will sometimes ask you to walk through doors you didn't anticipate. He may prompt you to move forward even when you can't yet see where the road leads. He calls you to believe he's working behind the scenes, even when you don't have all the answers in front of you. That's why it's so important to stay alert. Pay close attention to the shifts happening around you. Watch for patterns, unusual openings, or moments that seem far too precise to be random. Because when God is about to do something big, he doesn't leave his people unaware, he shows them. But only those with open eyes and willing hearts will recognize it when it comes. And when that moment arrives, one thing is certain. He will call you to step out in faith. That's always part of the process. He won't give you the full plan up front. He won't lay out every step before you move. Instead, he'll ask you to trust him without seeing the entire path. This is where many people get stuck. They want certainty. They want a guarantee. They want a crystal clear map of how it will all unfold before they're willing to act. But that's not how faith works. Faith is choosing to believe when logic says wait. Faith is moving forward even when the outcome is unknown. Faith is saying yes to God, even when fear tells you to stay still and wait for more clarity. Think about Peter. He and the other disciples were in the middle of a violent storm. Wave crashing, wind howling, chaos all around. Suddenly, they see Jesus walking on the water. And Peter, with his heart stirred by something deeper than fear, calls out to Jesus and asks to join him on the waves. That request defied all reason. The storm was dangerous. The boat was the only place that felt safe. But Peter understood one powerful truth. If Jesus was calling him, he was safer on the water with Jesus than he was in the boat without him. So what does stepping out of your own boat look like? That's what we'll uncover in the next part. Previously, we saw how Peter walked on water, defying the impossible, until he let fear cloud his focus. That moment revealed a deeper truth about faith. It thrives when our eyes stay fixed on the one who calls us. Peter stepped out of the boat, and for a brief, miraculous moment, he did the unthinkable. He walked on water. But then something shifted. He allowed his attention to drift from Jesus and instead locked onto the storm. The crashing waves, the roaring wind, the chaos around him. And the moment he did, he began to sink. That's what fear does. That's what happens when doubt overrules faith. When we let circumstances speak louder than God's voice, we lose our footing. But even in that moment of sinking, Jesus didn't abandon him. He didn't say, "I told you so." He reached out, took Peter by the hand, and lifted him up. Because that's who God is. He doesn't call you to step out just to watch you fail. He calls you so that you'll learn to trust him more completely than ever before. Some of you feel this right now. You've been sensing a divine nudge, maybe to start a business, begin a ministry, move to a new city, or walk away from something that's no longer meant for you. But instead of stepping forward, you're hesitating. You're waiting for absolute certainty. You're hoping for a sign so undeniable, so clear, that it leaves no room for doubt. But let me be honest with you. If you're waiting for everything to make perfect sense, you'll never take the leap. Because faith never comes with a full guarantee. Faith demands movement in the midst of uncertainty. It calls for trust when the path is still hidden. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave his homeland, to walk away from everything he had known, and to go to a place that God would show him. Not a place God had already revealed. Not a mapped-out destination. Just a promise that the way would unfold as he walked it. And Abraham obeyed. He stepped out without knowing where he was going, trusting that the one who had called him wouldn't lead him astray. So what does it really mean to walk in that kind of faith? That's exactly what we'll dive into next. In the last part, we reflected on Abraham's bold obedience, how he stepped out even without seeing the full picture. Now, let's talk about what happens when you do the same. Because Abraham obeyed, even when it was uncomfortable and uncertain, he became the father of many nations. His story is a powerful reminder that when God calls you to move, it won't always feel safe. In fact, it may feel overwhelming. Everything around you might scream, "Stay where it's familiar," and your own thoughts may echo the same fear. But if you truly want to experience the fullness of what God has planned for you, you must be willing to move when He says move. You have to trust even when the road ahead isn't fully visible. The truth is simple but powerful. Obedience is the key that unlocks God's promises. And sadly, many people stand just one step away from their breakthrough, but never cross the line. Paralyzed by fear, trapped in doubt. They wait for a feeling of certainty that never comes. But here's the turning point. The moment you decide to say yes, even while trembling, you open the door for God to do something extraordinary. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough, for a miracle, for something new to begin. But could it be that God is waiting for you to take the first step? Maybe the very answer you've been seeking lies just beyond that leap of faith. Maybe the door you've asked Him to open is already prepared, but it only unlocks when you start walking toward it. So I'll ask you plainly, what are you waiting for? If God is calling, will you trust Him? If He's leading, will you follow? Because the blessing, it's waiting on the other side of the step you're afraid to take. Wishing you strength, peace, and purpose on your journey. Stay courageous, stay faithful, and don't forget to subscribe to Mindset Daily for more inspiration like this.